Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Solid topic for you today. Let's do it. Redditors who spend a lot of time in seclusion, at sea, in the woods, etc. What's the creepiest thing that you've ever experienced? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. While out fishing, I became good friends with a fat beaver. He chilled next to me while I fished for about 2 hours, just watching me cast and catch fish. We watched an osprey dive into the lake and get a bass, which was an amazing moment. When the sun started setting, he sauntered back into the lake and we went our separate ways. The best fishing experience I had so far. I told this on another account once. While on deployment, my ship found a ship adrift off the coast of Australia. As an engineer trained for BBSS, I was tasked with assessing the ship's mechanical status on boarding. It was deserted. Fish in the hold, and stuff set out like people were just there. There was food on the galley area that was still warm, etc. We never found the crew, so we towed the boat in for the authorities. Absolutely scared the F out of people, and those who didn't board the ship didn't believe us when we were telling them about the state of it. My fiance and I went hiking up a mountain in the Pacific Northwest last summer. It's perpetually muddy due to a large number of waterfalls along the sides of the trail, so there's no way you can avoid getting at least a little dirty. Around an hour and a half up the trail, we passed two men wearing black suits, black hats, black glasses, holding black leather briefcases and wearing black dress shoes, completely clean dress shoes, and immaculately clean pressed pants. Not a spot of dirt or wrinkle on either of their clothes. As we passed each other, one of them whispered something in German. I looked back at them, and they were both standing still and looking back at us staring. One of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and I've had my fair share of strange experiences. Yeah, that's certainly creepy. And also kinda cool at the same time, but creepy for sure. Sorry for a not me but someone else's story, but here it is anyway. I used to work for the U.S. Forest Service, and sometimes worked with an older gentleman that had lots of interesting stories from his many years of life. But by far the most chilling tale was from when he was working in a very secluded area of wilderness and was walking through the forest when a thunderstorm hit. He had seen an opening in the hill a little while back and headed to it to take shelter. Once inside, he shined his flashlight to check he wasn't going to wake up a bear or something, and found the skeleton of a man sitting in a lawn chair with a rifle rigged up so he had been able to shoot himself. The skeleton was still wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. I've met a lot of bullshitters in my time, and this guy wasn't one. He'd honestly just led an interesting life. I was in a remote area surveying populations of various organisms in mountain streams. One morning, an older man crossed the stream I was standing in. We both froze for a second, and he continued on his way. He didn't have any gear with him, and it's a 15 to 20 mile hike from the nearest dirt road. My point is, he wasn't just casually wandering through. So I worked at a ranch in southern Arizona, right on the border. I didn't really consider it to be secluded because I had horses and cows. In hindsight, I guess it was really lonely because sometimes they'd talk back to me. Anyways, doing fence borders with a guy from another camp, and we had to go down into this dry riverbed. As we round the bend, we see a bunch of beat-up trucks sitting there, armed to the teeth. Turns out, we ran into some kind of big deal for a cartel. The other guy told me to keep steady, and we just walked straight through them on our horses. Everyone staring at us, looking like they were ready to shoot us up if we made one false move. I asked about it when we got to the other side, without turning into Swiss cheese, and the more experienced rancher told me, the cartel only cares about border patrol and cops. They know this is a ranch, and they know we roam around here, and they know we don't say much. Reason being, if they ever assumed the ranchers were the snitches, they could easily find our little ranch houses. Only had one person to so many acres. could have been offed and left there for many days before someone noticed. With all that in mind, I had a very passive relationship with those kind from then on. I was running on a logging road in central Wisconsin and stopped because I felt like I was being watched. It was just an instinctive feeling. That's when I noticed a large wolf step out of the forest about 50 yards ahead of me. It was just staring, and I stared back. After about 30 seconds of us checking each other out, it just slipped back into the woods and was gone. I kept running in the same direction, but never really shook the feeling of being watched. I guess it's not that scary because wolves rarely attack people, but you betcha it was creepy enough being alone out there. So out where I live, it's just outside of a town nestled at the bottom of mountains. FYI, I live in Australia. And it's not too secluded since I live with my family, and you'll generally come across someone's property every 500 meters, but there are some stretches where you won't see a house for a kilometer. One night, my mom and I are coming home pretty late at night, and we're just talking and listening to the radio. We come around a corner, and we both saw this effing creature that I still don't know what it is till this day. But it had the body the size of a medium dog, mangy looking black fur, an almost abnormally large head, big green eyes, which was the first thing I noticed. But most weirdly, an almost impossibly long and thin neck, like it shouldn't be able to support the large head. My mother and I are effing cussing like sailors at this point and make a U-turn around to get a better look at it. And within 10 seconds, there was no trace of it. Normally, I'd brush off this as probably a wild dog, but the body just didn't look like a dog. And it was too big for a cat, even a wild one. The real scary part is that my family and I have seen that maybe 2 to 3 times now, almost exclusively late at night. However, my significant other's father has said that he's also seen it twice, once at night and once at a daytime, and I get the feeling we're not the only people in town to have seen it. All right, nature experts, what do we think? What could it have been? Some type of genetic anomaly? Mange? What do you think? Weird giraffe? I was on an outward bound trip in the White River National Forest in Colorado. A part of OB trips is a solo, which can be anywhere from 12 to 48 hours, in which the participants are by themselves with a journal and some snacks. I set up a sweet tent in a tree grouping. It had rained the night before, so the ground was pretty soft. After setting up, I walked around the area. I felt pretty tired and decided to take a nap for 8 hours. I woke up in the middle of the night to a bunch of twigs cracking. It turned on my torch to look to see if it was the instructors or any kind of animal. I even called out, "Hey, you good?" Not sure why I said it that way. Nothing. In the morning, I found some big cat tracks right by my tent that were not there when I took my nap. It was really unnerving knowing that a mountain lion was near me when I was sleeping. I told the guides about it, and they got really particular about keeping our food away from where we were sleeping. Little late to the thread, but want to share. I went on a 2.5 week long hike in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, like a couple of hours from even the smallest of towns. One night I decided to set up camp on a ridgeline overlooking a valley with a dirt road bisecting it. Most nights I would have had a small fire, but it was breezy and was cutting across the ridge pretty hard. I think the weather saved my life. At about 10 p.m., a truck drove down the road, and there was a rhythmic pattern of door opens, dome light comes on, driver grabs something from passenger floorboard, drops it out of the truck, closes the door, drives slowly for 20 seconds, and repeats. He did that for what looked like a mile. I thought it was weird, but whatever. 15 minutes later, a different vehicle, a Suburban, drives up along the road. The driver was holding a flashlight out the window and stopped in the same spots the truck did. Open door, pick up something, close door, drive, open door, pick up something, drive. I don't know what the F it was, but I'm convinced that I would have ended up with a couple more bullets in me than I'd like, if I had that campfire. Serious. I was living in a dirt floor cabin for about 6 months. I would pack a lunch and hike out half a day in random directions. One day I found an abandoned hotel with an attic full of bats. The old kitchen was full of taxidermy. Not abandoned old taxidermy, current taxidermy in various states of finish. There was a closet with stacks of dead birds, tools, woodworking tools, and glass for the display cases, etc. I noped out of there in a hurry. I took my brother there later because he didn't believe me. So I have a witness. More mysterious than creepy, we were camping in Montana near Yellowstone Park in a small campground. It was the off-season, and there were maybe 5 other people there, including a couple 3 to 4 spots down, who had a large dog with them in their RV. I walked by, and the dog was friendly, so I pet it, and talked to it, and went on my way. Later that night, I'm sitting watching the sunset and reading on my Kindle when a cold nose once bumps under my arm, like dog does when it wants attention. I figured it was the dog and started scratching its head. Before I could look around, my friend came around the corner and froze with a look of fright on his face. I was scratching the head of a pretty big gray wolf. I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to keep touching it, but I didn't want to stop and piss it off either. I scratched for maybe 5 to 10 more seconds, and it just looked at me like, "Thanks, bro," and walked off into the woods. We went to a hotel that night. I was 13 and on a week-long camping trip. There were 2 adults and 5 other kids my age. One night, we had spent all day kayaking and got caught in a deluge that threw off our whole schedule for the day. We couldn't quite make it to the location where we were supposed to set up camp for the night before sunset, so we just settled a few meters off on the river. We were so exhausted that the adults didn't even want to build a fire. Since we didn't have much light, and it was hot, they told us that we didn't have to build our shelters, we could just lay out in our sleeping bags. Everyone put their sleeping bags near a clearing that was created by a felled tree, but I saw the hole created by the roots and thought that there were possibly creepy crawlies living in it. So I set my sleeping bag a little further back, about 4 meters away from the clearing. I woke up a few hours later to these rapid clicking sounds and sniffing. Thanks to the internet, I later identified it as deer noises. There were a bunch of them. The clicking grew closer and was surrounding me on all sides. I had my flashlight, but I didn't want to shine it because I was afraid to scare the deer creatures because I thought they would trample me. The most vocal deer then stepped on my sleeping bag and eventually sat down on it. I could hear the other deer get comfortable too. After a while, I allow myself to peek out, not wearing my glasses, and I see maybe 15 deer creatures all just watching the other campers. After several hours, I fell asleep and woke back up as they were leaving at sunrise. It was wholesome, but creepy. My parents bought a house in the mountains near National Forest land around the time I was in 9th grade. I loved the woods and nature, so I would sneak out at night and walk through the forest all the time. A winter night in a forest in northern Utah is amazing. They can also be terrifying. I later learned to identify some of the more common animal calls and cries, but at the time I knew nothing about any of that. So as I'm wandering alone through this forest one time, I heard the most blood-curdling and terrifying scream I've ever heard. I froze the second I heard it, lowered to the ground, and didn't move for what seemed like forever. Eventually, a fox runs across the dry riverbed near where I was. Scared the absolute shit out of me. If you've never heard a fox cry, it is the scream of nightmares. You see all kinds of cool stuff in the forest if you can be slow and quiet. I don't spend much time at Seclusion, but I still have a story. I live in rural Ohio. Oh boy. One of my friends owns a nice barn and farmhouse out in the sticks where the buses don't run and there's no service. He doesn't actually live there. His family owns the house for shiggles. They're millionaires. We've never ran there, and it's pretty scenic woods, so we decided we'd give it a shot. He and I ran cross-country, and our team went to state that year to run, so we were in really good shape. We get to this barn and plan on running 8 miles near a road and then through the woods. We have GPS watches, so we can just make our own path and either turn back at 4 miles or make a looping path if we so desire. After about 2 miles of running on the road, we took a random gravel road through the woods, and there was a hiking path through it, so we decided to take it. We live in the country, so it really wasn't a big deal. We've done this sort of thing before. I've gotten lost in the woods and in runs a few times throughout high school, but we had never done it here so far away from home. I don't run with my glasses on, and I'm blind as a bat. I'm making good pace when all of a sudden I smack into my friend. I look up and he's just standing there. I focus at what he's looking at, and there's a bear trap hanging on a branch in front of us. Looking around, there are more, all blowing in the breeze. Off in the middle, perched up against the tree, was something that resembled a man. My friend pushed me and told me to run. We didn't say a word until we got back to the main road because we ran so fast. Turns out my friend saw what looked like a bloody scarecrow leaning against a tree. He saw bear traps on the ground, too.
It's pretty creepy. I mean, I get out on some trails and running, generally alone a lot, but yeah, I'd turn back. Just being honest.
3 of us were sitting around a campfire on a bluff overlooking Bell Lake and Killarney Provincial Park when suddenly there was a blinding flash that lit up the entire sky. We were stunned. After several moments of silence, our one guy said, "Everyone check your watches." To this day, none of us have any idea what that flash was, but we all saw it, and it freaked us out pretty good. Another time I was house sitting for my parents who were traveling overseas. It was maybe 11:30 p.m., and I was sitting on the picnic table smoking a cigarette when I heard a screech owl calling. I can do a fairly decent screech owl calling, so I started calling it. After several minutes of back and forth, the owl arrived on a branch about 8 feet above my head. So I was checking it out, doing that crazy owl thing with its head rotating all the way around, and I was checking him out and rotating my head as far as I could. All of the sudden, a large shadow streaked over my head, and the screech owl was gone. Several feathers drifted slowly downward. It was then that I remembered the great horned owls eat screech owls. One had swooped in and snatched that cute little guy right in front of my eyes. What freaked me out the most was that the huge bird with a 5-foot wingspan is absolutely dead silent in flight. I basically grew up outside. I don't get scared in the dark. Noises don't bother me, but that silent assassin owl scared the shit out of me. I had to go inside.